Today, we are so grateful and it's an honor to have Mary Rodwell to come to us and share with us. So let me first introduce Mary Rodwell is one of Australia's leading researchers and writers in the UFO and phenomenon. Mary is the author of a number of highly acclaimed books, including Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life in 2002, and The New Human in 2016, which describes and documents star children. She is also a producer of EBE award-winning documentaries, Expressions of ET Contact, a Visual Blueprint in year 2000, and a Communication and Healing Blueprints in 2004. Mary is the founder and principal of Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, ACERN, established in 1997 to provide professional counseling support, hypnotherapy, and information to individuals and their families with anomalous paranormal experiences and abduction contact experiences. Mary is also a director and chair of the Experiencer Support Program of Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, FREE. And in November 2003, Mary's work was featured and she was interviewed for the article Alien Invasion, Why We Need to Believe in Australian Doctor Focus magazine. So she has researched more than 3,000 cases and suggests extraterrestrial encounters are a global phenomenon, and this is evident in the new humans referred to as star children. Mary has lectured around the world, including Hong Kong, USA, Canada, Hawaii, UK, Ireland, France, and many other countries, regularly in national and international media programs and in documentaries. So Mary is very experienced, and welcome, Mary. It's a really pleasure and an honor to have you with us today.
Jenny, it's really wonderful to see you again. And I remember my visit to Hong Kong with great delight and all those wonderful souls that I met there. So it's wonderful to connect again with you.
Thank you, Mary. We're so happy as well. So I noticed that Mary has been a former midwife and a nurse, and with your medical knowledge and experience, and you've dealt with scientific studies on our body, biology, chemistry, all kinds of things. So what makes you sidetracked and become interested in topics of counseling, extraterrestrial contact, spirituality, and consciousness?
It's a good question, Jenny. And I would say that when I was a nurse and a midwife, if you told me 30 or 40 years later I'd be traveling the world talking about UFOs, I would have probably thought that you were crazy. But I left my nursing and midwife profession, went into counseling, and got to really enjoy counseling as another kind of healing tool. And when I came to Australia, I stayed with counseling, working with people in hospice, people with grief and bereavement. What that did was, when you work with people from another psychological level, often they tell you interesting things. You know, they have experiences that we find hard to accept sometimes, you know, seeing spirits, for example, or hearing spirits, this kind of thing. It opened me more and more to exploring the non-physical realm and reading more on things like reincarnation and what have you. But I hadn't really looked into what I work with now, and that's people that have had contact with non-human intelligences. That happened because I read a couple of books. One of them was Dr. John Mack and his book, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. And he was a professor of psychiatry at Harvard University. He'd done all the psychological testing, and he was convinced that this was real. I also read a book called Communion with Whitley Strieber, which is a very classic book of Whitley Strieber's own personal experiences with non-human intelligences, almost preparing me, I think, for my first client that came through the door that said, well, I've heard you're open-minded. For this, they just think you're crazy, and talked about having experiences where he would wake up with shaved areas on his legs, marks. His partner was having experiences, and the children were having experiences. And he said, can you help? Fortunately, I had at least read something on this subject. I didn't know what to make of it, but the man was very genuine. And when the whole family is involved, it certainly isn't a personal hallucination. If They're all experiencing things. So that was very compelling. And from that, I started to look into it. 2 weeks later, somebody else came to see me who'd had experiences. And it was like, hold on a minute, this isn't rare after all. This is getting a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I ended up working with a social worker who'd had experiences, and our first support group, 12 people turned up. And this is in a city of barely 2 million at the time. And I thought, hold on a minute, this is maybe there's more to the numbers. And of course, 25 to nearly 30 years later, I've worked with about 3,500 families, children globally that have had this experience. And I will tell you now, I believe that's the tip of the iceberg. I think this is a lot more common than people realize, except they don't know what it is they're experiencing. So they just think they're a bit weird, or it's a bit paranormal, or, you know, it's all spirits, or it's all, you know, not realizing that this is very real contact with non-human intelligences that's been happening all through history.
So can I say that there is a system or the experiments, or you're gathering proofs and evidence to show that, okay, these people are not crazy. They're actually having real experiences, and they have impact on them and on their lives and on their consciousness, the way of thinking and all that.
That's a good question, Jenny, and it's absolutely right, because if it was just a psychological illness, it would be very different for every person that said, oh, I'm having this or having this. I developed, and there's been many other questionnaires developed where we notice patterns of experience, and somebody will explain that they have certain things happening to them, and it would be part of these continual patterns of the same kind of experience. Waking up with marks on their body, for example, having orbs of light entering the room, seeing beings when they wake up, like light beings or little grey beings or whatever in their room, for example, having what we call missing time, where they've gone on a journey and then discovered that the journey took longer than they'd realized because they'd had an interaction or they'd been taken up on board craft or whatever. There are hundreds of different patterns that people with this experience have. And they're people that don't necessarily believe in aliens.
Yes.
You know, this is not about, I believe in them, therefore I'm going to see them. Some people will say, I've had zero interest in ETs. I've got no interest whatsoever, but it seems I'm having something go on that is very similar to that. So it's not like people are wanting or believing it because they want to. It's often the very opposite to that. In fact, they don't want to believe it's real. Many of them would rather not have that as part of their experience. So you've got people that are saying, I don't know what's going on or why, but this is my experience. And when you realize that this is not just one age group or one culture, you know, I've got families, it goes through families, and there can be grandparents, right down to parents, right down to grandchildren that are all having experiences. So it goes down family lines as well. So you can have a whole family, and I've got many cases where the whole family is involved in having that experience through the generations as well. So this isn't a personal hallucination here. This is a whole family of events that tell us something profound has happened. And the other thing that's important here is they change after these experiences. And that is evidence of something very real has happened. You don't change on a hallucination, but you certainly change if you've had a life-changing experience, which this is.
So how are the changes?
That's where the evidence is that it's real, because they change in the way they look at life. They become very focused on exploring scientific concepts. They may get very interested in quantum physics or the history of of who we are as a species, or they get very fascinated in certain subjects, find that they have lost interest in materialism, materialistic values. They find they become more holistic. They feel more connected to everything. They want to take care of the planet. They find themselves really shifting their whole psychological and spiritual focus after these experiences. And on top of that, many of them find themselves drawing the beings, or they may be drawing strange scripts or strange codes. They may be finding themselves getting drawn to healing, for example. So there are really profound changes after these experiences that cannot be just because they've had a hallucination. This is because something real and profound has happened.
So that's just to say they're not making up stories because they didn't have that background in the first place, and then suddenly, because of the experience, they suddenly change to all the interests and the mindset and everything. So that proves they're not making up stories, and they're not crazy, and that is not hallucinations.
What we've done in the time previous to where we last spoke, when I was in Hong Kong, was there was a survey done by the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation with 4,200 people globally. 10 countries were taken in, and 600 questions. And one of the results of that was quite mind-blowing. What it stated was that 85% had a psycho-spiritual transformation after encounters. That's 85% of that 4,200 people of 10 countries. Now, that is telling you something very significant, that these
huge numbers.
There's huge numbers, and significantly, they have changed due to their experiences. And again, you don't change unless something very profound has occurred.
Right, that's not something you can learn, or you do it by yourself.
Yes, exactly right.
Right. So, well, just now you mentioned the conference you did in Hong Kong. I actually know Mary through Kaza, who is a walk-in, and she's also a very extraordinary and amazing lady with enlightening messages and insights. And it's still not something commonly heard in Hong Kong or in Asian areas about walk-ins. And I remember, Mary, you have studied some walk-in cases. Can you share with us what you know about them? What do you think they are, and why do they come to Earth?
It's a good question, Jenny. And again, this takes us into the complexity of us being visited by many different species of non-human intelligences. And I will say that we are related to them genetically. There's we believe at least 12 different species that have added their DNA to the Homo sapiens sapiens. So we're connected to them anyway. But when it comes to the soul, it's really interesting. Walk-ins have been known about for many, many years, where people have realized that they were not the original soul in a particular body. And some remember actually when the shift happened. It may be after an accident, for example, or an illness or something like this. And what it is the soul has an agreement with the other soul, that the soul that's in it to start with says, well, I only need to be in a human body for 15 years or 20 years. Rather than waste the body, they have an agreement with another soul to come in and utilize that body for other growth and what have you. I can give you a little story of one that was very interesting to me, of a lady that told me. She was in her 60s when she spoke to me. Very dignified, beautiful soul. And she said to me, I'm a walk-in. And she said, and I remember being on a cylindrical craft. She said, I was 9 feet tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. She said, we were telepathic, and we took in light as our food and our energy. And she said, and the next thing I remember, I was being born into a 3-year-old girl's body. And she said, I remember the shock. She said, because I had to learn to talk and I had to learn to eat, because I didn't do that where I came from. And she goes back as a soul to, if you like, she calls herself an undercover agent almost. But she would go back to her family, her star family, and tell them what it's like to be human. So she acted as a kind of conduit for that. And she was very comfortable with it. She, but she'd been aware since 3 years old that wasn't her body, that she'd moved into this body that was just a 3-year-old little girl. That was a very interesting one.
Yeah.
So You know, I'm hearing of many, many that say that they're walk-ins, and there's been quite a few books written about people who have that memory of walking into a body, not at birth, although some may be, but mostly during some period of the life, they've swapped and taken over from the other soul. So it's actually a lot more commonplace than people realize.
And if she remembers it's exactly 3 years old, there's not something she can make it up, or
No.
what this concept is, because it's not like common concept, not like ghosts or angels or fairies, that kind of stories. It's not like common story that we usually heard. It's not, well, you can make it up or pretend you are one of them.
She was very, very clear that there was a conscious memory. The knowing, she said, there are a few like me, she said, on the planet that come from that place. But she was very aware of what she was like before she incarnated into human form, and very clear about that. And she said that she goes regularly out of body to go back to her star family and tell them what it's like. So very, very clear. So this is very much, I think, a phenomena that is part of what the soul can do.
So did these contactees or these walk-ins tell you, so why do they come to Earth, but why not by birth or reincarnation, but choose the way as a walk-in?
My understanding is that sometimes when there is a healthy body, some soul may say, well, I only need that body for up to 15 because that's all I need to achieve what I've come to do as a human and learn from and grow from. Rather than waste the body, they say, you can come in and I'll leave because I've achieved what I've wanted to achieve. So the others will say, well, I didn't want to go through the birth again. I didn't want to go with all the growing up and the toddlers and the teething, all that kind of stuff. I've got a job to do, just like Kaz has got a job to do. And it's better that I come in when, you know, you're fully mature as a human, and then I can get on with my work, which is, you know, rather than go through the whole childhood and all the rest of it. They've got a mission, they've got a job to do, just like Kaza had a job to do.
So, Mary, you have written a book, The New Human, Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage. So, in the book, you've mentioned some star children and like star seed and indigo child. So are they similar, that they have something to do on Earth or mission?
It's a good question. And what I first came into understanding was when people came to me having experiences, I found out that with many of them, there was an intergenerational link to the experiences, like grandmother, grandfather, or whatever, interested in UFOs or very psychic or intuitive or whatever. And then I looked at the children, and the children were often, could be very different. And I wondered why that was. And they were given labels, you know, metaphysical labels like crystals, crystal children, indigo children, children of light, golden children, all that. But mainstream gave them other labels, such as ADHD, dyslexia, autism, Asperger's, and what have you, neurodivergent. Remember thinking at the time, so are these really dysfunctions, or have they qualities that we haven't yet recognized because they're very different? And Neil Gold, who's in Hong Kong, as you know, and wrote Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind, he remembers recognizing he was ADHD when he was a kid, but it wasn't diagnosed. He wasn't diagnosed then. He only found out when he's in his 50s. And he said, you know, he had interactions with the light beings, but he said his awareness was multi-layered. He could see the matrix. He could actually see more than most people. And he retranslated ADHD as always dialed into higher dimensions. What we're seeing is that many of the ADHD are a higher frequency. And because of that, they're harder to program into the old mindset, the old belief system, the old paradigm, which I think is deliberate. I think it's deliberate because these intelligences want us now to expand our consciousness, to open ourselves up to a greater reality. And so they created mindsets that are harder to program, but have special abilities. And I believe all those that we give labels to, like autism, certain types of autism, Asperger's and what have you, have certain qualities the average, what we call normal child hasn't got.
Yes.
And that's deliberate. And many of them come in with a sense of mission and purpose. They've got something to do. And many of them find they can communicate with animals, for example. And many children say they communicate with animals. And so what we've got is a new generation of humans that have been coming in 20, 30, maybe 40 years in total, that are exhibiting these amazing abilities, but they're not recognized and only seen as dysfunction in many cases. And that's what the new human is exploring, the stories of these amazing children that are everywhere. They're in every culture, every country across the globe.
Yes, I myself actually has ADHD, discovered that just these few years. And, you know, I've always thought, and for parents to these children, they thought they have defected brains and they don't work well, they don't socialize well with common people. So by looking at this new generation, we call them, what do you think the future we are heading to?
Well, that's a good question too. And I feel that they've come in more and more bigger numbers because of a shift in what I call human consciousness. And many people are seeing this in themselves, where they were looking at one time a few years ago, thinking the world consisted in a certain way of trying to make money to pay the bills, and this kind of rat race of slavery, I call it, or whatever, but realizing that none of that made sense. And they shifted to a new awareness where they want to make a difference to the planet. They want to put their energies into supporting the better part of human nature, one where we care about one another, one that looks at healing, that looks at being connected and understanding each other. A completely great shift in terms of how we see each other and the world and the universe as being all connected. And this is what has, happened through this shift in consciousness that's going on. And the children are bringing that awareness in as well. I spoke to a 7-year-old a few days ago in the US, and she told me that she's come in as a healer. And that, she's very aware that's her job.
She knew that already.
She's already doing behaving as an energetic healer with her mother. She was actually doing the movements, bringing in the frequencies, all at 7 years old for her mother, because her mother was having a problem, and she actually was sending this out. And she said to me that not only does she do healing, and she's going to be a healer, she actually, what she does is activate the healing in other people so they can heal themselves. Now, this is her awareness. She's just 7. Literally. She's only 7 years old. This is what I mean. These children are coming in with amazing awareness. She sees herself as part human, part blue avian being. So if you like, a kind of hybrid. And I talk to others that have other children that see themselves not just human, but part of the star family or star origins as well. And this is conscious. This is not something they've read about, or it's not something somebody said to them, because the parents are often not knowing what to do with it when they get information. This doesn't make, how can I make sense of this? But it's they speak about it very normally, just like the 7-year-old.
Oh, so it's really unbelievable and hard for the parents to accept that, because it's not like the parent is already a healer, that they are very open to this kind of practice already. So it's the other way around. The child comes in suddenly telling that she is a healer and healing the mother.
Absolutely. And this is where these new generations are coming in, I believe, as teachers. They're coming in to teach us a new way. And they've come in as a soul agreement. Many of them are aware. I was talking about a year ago, there was the 10-year-old that explained it was his first time on this planet. And so he'd picked a mother that had been to the planet Earth a lot of times so that she could help him adjust to being human because it's his first time here. So he needed a mother that understood how humans work so that he could come to do his mission, which was to help with pollution on this planet.
Pollution. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, this is, it's mind-blowing. Like in Hong Kong and in Asian countries, China, we notice that the new generation, it's really totally different. They think differently. They're challenging the old systems like property market, the usual labor market. They refuse to be slaves of property, the real estates, and they don't want to work long hours. They say they want their own lives, so they'd rather spend more time to doing having their own fun, and refuse to take up the works from the family business. And it's a pain and it's a big headache for the older generation because there's no passing on. They don't success the old business and they refuse to really work hard. So there is this the middle level has been like gone. And maybe that explains something, that this new generation suddenly waking up or challenged our old mindsets and our patterns.
Well, it's challenging the cultural norm, which is, you work hard, you do your best to get the best education, you work hard, and you go into the family business if necessary, or you do this, and this, and because that's what the parents did, and the parents did it because their parents did it, and their parents did it, and it's gone down the family line. But these new generations are challenging all of that. And the indigos, which are those that have a kind of indigo energy, are kind of like social rebels, really. They're actually to change the whole system. And because those in education or whatever are challenged by the fact that they're not taking on board the old social norms or even the education in the way that it is. Because what is not understood is many of these children are tapping into other sources of information, which these intelligences are downloading information and telling them a great number of things. And this is part of it. They're listening to that connection, which may come from, their higher self or their inner wisdom, or from these intelligences, because many of them get downloads of information which challenge what they're taught. And I remember one 12-year-old explaining to me, she was from the US, and she said, sometimes when we are at school, she said, I'm told things that are not right. And I said, how do you know? And she said, well, I've got a little being that stands with me and tells me when it's rubbish and then I shouldn't listen. And the real truth is whatever it is. And so she's already got access to another source of information that's telling her, well, that's rubbish what you're being taught there. It isn't true. So
it's hard for the teachers or parents or people like us, the older generation, that's been so tapped into the old pattern, old norm. So what do you think? How should we live or work with these new generation, new humans?
Well, first of all, I think what the parents say to me is, what do I do with this? How do I? Some of them don't want to go and be educated in schools because often they can get bullied. Many of them are empaths, very sensitive, and they struggle with that. So you get parents that ultimately may end up, homeschooling them, for example, because they don't handle school. But a lot of them get very depressed going to standard schools. They have knowledge and awareness that we should be listening to. And that many of them say we've come in as teachers. So they've come to teach the parents and the teachers, the adult teachers, to learn and how they need to operate. And ultimately, I think it's going to have to be almost a reversal of roles where we have these new, very aware children telling us how we can help them with their mission, their job that they've come to do. And this is where it's going to change the whole dynamics, because it's so alien, if you like, to human nature to have children telling you what they need to do what they've come here to do. But I think we're having to listen. And when I talk to the parents and they say to me, how can I help? I said, you've just got to listen and hear them and hear how they understand things, because the only way we're going to understand is if we listen to how they experience and what they understand and how they understand it. It'll teach us how best to support them as they grow up and do whatever they believe they've come here to do.
Right, this is very important to many parents, that they thought like the child might have ADHD and autism and all those kind of, they call that as dysfunction or defects. So they try to fix the kids and giving them pills or so that they can easily go to school and work and socialize with other schoolmates. So Mary, you're suggesting that maybe parents can listen more to what they want and what they need and try to, learn from them instead of pushing them back to the old system.
What I wrote about in The New Human was not just what we were seeing and how they're struggling in a 3D reality, is how do you help someone with ADHD stabilize and manage living in a 3D reality without drugs.
Yes.
And I worked with a molecular biologist, Dr. Lena Olsen from Sweden, who had already herself had ADHD and her family. And she said there are certain nutrients they need to help stabilize them, choline in the diet, more certain minerals and what have you. So in the book, I have got ways of helping your child with ADHD without drugs, but with certain extra minerals and certain things that they need more of because they're operating on a higher frequency.
Yeah.
And the same goes to how we understand autism, how we understand Asperger's, so in other words, once we understand how they operate, we can help them then work through the minefield of managing to be in a 3D reality, because some of them are experiencing things multidimensionally with, this, we call it synesthesia, and you may be aware of it and some people may be or not, where you've got perhaps the number 5, which we would write 5. But to them, they would not only see it written as 5, they'd see it as an energy, they'd see it as a frequency, they would see it as a color, and all together. So it would be experienced more than just the letter 5 that you and I would just write on a piece of paper, because that's how they see reality. I remember one 8-year-old explaining that when her mum showed her emotions, there were different colors for the emotions coming out of her mouth. And she'd say, when you're like this, Mum, this is the color I'm seeing. And when you're angry, this is another color that I'm seeing. So we've got children that are experiencing multidimensionally, but unless you know that, you don't understand why they react in a certain way, because you're thinking that they're seeing things the way you see things, when in fact they may not.
Yeah, this is what parents definitely need to hear, because, well, for people who don't really understand what's going on, they might thought, well, maybe kids are just talking bullshit and they're making up stories and trying to draw attention. And so, well, parents may really need to take attention to this kind of possibilities, that they might be, new humans that really seeing aura or different energy, that they may try to help them in a different ways. Great.
I think it's really important for us to be aware that there's a big shift in the way we're incarnating, we're evolving, and it's not just evolution, it's with the assistance of many of these intelligences that are taking these children up on board craft and teaching them certain things to use their mind, to use their creativity, to realize more of what they are and who they are. So it's not just the educational system here. We're talking about another system, I call it space school, where children as young as 3 go and talk about going with the little beings and learning things on spacecraft.
I've heard from many other different experts or researchers saying that 2024 is a very important year, that there is big shifts, and it's May now, but for all these months, there are many things happened already within these few months, and also last year, the war and unsettling world on Earth. And what do you think it's happening, Mary, that with all the new humans that came and there is big shifts on Earth, what's going on?
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on, but I think that what we're seeing, and we mentioned this earlier, didn't we, that there's a lot of struggles and challenges for most people on the planet, no matter what country you're living in now. There's, people are struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to put a roof over their head.
Yes.
The younger generations are struggling because they don't see any chance that they're going to own anything, any chance for, a lifelong career or whatever. Many of them are not able to work. And there's, everything's become so impossible that most people have become very disheartened and disenchanted with their lives and their, whatever. And I think that this is taking us to a certain crisis point of where people are really questioning everything in their lives. They're questioning why they're here, what's it all about, is there any purpose to it or whatever. And I think this has been deliberate because we've been leading up to this, I think, for a long time, where, we're finally realizing that for many of us, there's no fun on this planet other than hard work and slavery, almost, material slavery. It's like, but what also is happening is with that has come an awakening of consciousness, a realization there's more to life than our 3D world. We're all born with a multidimensional ability to sense the non-physical world, whether it's through sensing, knowing, feeling, and just an awareness that there's something more. And what's happening through that despair, through that questioning that has been caused by what's happening on the planet and the way it's run, has also been a catalyst for people to go within and to start to explore their inner world. And with that, the awareness that comes with that, the realization that there are other intelligences, some physical, some non-physical, that are around us, supporting us, guiding us, whether you call that your guardian angel or, your guides or your higher self, doesn't really matter. But that's helping people to make sense of the journey, the human journey. But what's also going on is with that awakening, people are wanting to change things. They're wanting to create a better world, not only for themselves, but their families, for their children and for their grandchildren, whatever. And so there's become this shift in really creating a new world, a new kind of earth, a new kind of way of living. And that's where I think we're almost at the moment, where people are saying, we need to change this. We need to change the way we're doing things if we're to have a future and our children to have a future, and one that is beautiful and should be on this beautiful planet of ours, which has somehow lost its way. So I think all these different generations in recent years are souls that have come in to help with that shift in consciousness. And also the new ones coming in are very awake. Many of them remember past lives. Many of them remember they've come from other planets and they've got special skills. And I was talking to an 8-year-old a few months ago that said she was a hybrid. She was a water being plus human. And she said she came from a water planet. And she said, so she's a water being plus human. And she described the way she understood music was very different to everybody else, because not only did she hear the music, she could go on the frequency to where the music was created and understand the emotions and feelings of the musician that created the music. So these are what I mean, is these amazing skills and awareness that most of us would think was quite magical.
Yes.
Are actually what these new children are coming in and these new generations are bringing in. So they're bringing a greater understanding of our non-physical world, where they're connecting to that consciousness, that sentience of everything. And that's how we're going to change, I think, because we're not just going to be isolated thinking it's all about me. We're realizing that whatever happens, it's all of us. We're in this together. It isn't just I matter and nobody else matters. We're actually realizing we all matter. And once we get that, we can change this world and make it the place I think we'd all prefer to be in.
Yes, that's hopeful because about teenagers these days, especially in Hong Kong, there are almost every day there's suicidal cases that teenagers or some 10-year-old really young people who commit suicide because of academics or family problems or relationship problems. And it's really sad to hear because this is our new generation. So what's going on with our society, what's going on with our education system, and what's happening with the family. And it brings up some hope that maybe these are not problematic teenagers. The problem may lies on us, that we need to learn and communicate more with them and to see how to, think about our inner self and know what we really need from our inner self. Not only about living and working.
Jenny, you're absolutely right. And it's also quite true that that's not just in Hong Kong. There are many, what I call new humans, the new generations of human that can't cope with the way things are in the old system. And I remember he told me he was 16 when he was talking to me, but he said when he was 10 or 11, his family told him to stop being so weird and to be normal and to see reality as it is, because he was seeing the world in a multidimensional way. And he said, Mary, I tried to do that for a while. I tried not to be weird and tried to do normal things and be as they saw normal.
Normal, yeah.
And I got so depressed, suicidal, I nearly took my life, until I decided that either I finish my life or I open up again to what made sense to me. So he said, I decided to open up again. But he said it's very hard because of my sensitivity. I would go to school and I would be aware of everything that's going on with the other children, their emotional problems, their trauma and whatever, because he was very, very intuitive. And he said, but I had to deal with that because it was better than ending my life. But what's happening is a lot of the new humans that are tuning in like that or aware, they don't want to be different. They don't want to be seen as different. And so they'll maybe take drugs or alcohol or other things to shut themselves down in some way so they can be like everybody else because they don't want to be different. And that's another strategy which isn't helpful, because all it does is make them more depressed ultimately, or ends up their life because they overdose on something or they do other harmful things. But this is often what they will do just to survive. So we've got to look at it as a society and say, what the hell are we doing? No, we really do.
Yeah, that's really new and insightful for for society like Hong Kong. That's all about material and about money and living and survival comes first. And yeah, that's really thoughtful, and I think people need to really digest and think about their own lives as well. So Mary, you have worked with thousands of cases. What other cases that you think is most unforgettable or special that you may want to share with us?
It's a question I get asked a lot, Jenny, but the trouble is there's too many of them to actually say that one's more special than another one, because so many stories are incredible. But I will tell you what's again happening through the generations, and one of them is a family in recent years that I have been in contact with that live in Australia, and the mother's had 7 children and 6 of them are girls. what's fascinating is that she's been very careful to keep them away from a lot of the usual bad foods and all the rest of it. She's very aware of energy, and she's had lots of interesting experiences herself. But what was fascinating to me is each of the children, all of them are having encounters and drawing the beings that they're seeing. And the eldest one, Gigi, who I talk about, she's 17, she's probably nearly 18 now, has drawn at least 200 plus, I think something like 260 beings that she interacts with. So when people say, you know, oh, there's just maybe humanoids and the greys and maybe the tall whites and reptilians, and that's about it. No, we're talking about hundreds of different intelligences. And even with the greys, I was told that there were at least 165 species of those alone. So what we are in is, you know, when we look at it, we're living in an incredible, busy universe with many different civilizations. But she literally has drawn all the different beings she interacts with. So have her sisters. You go down the line, they've all drawn the beings. They interact with other species, including animals, including dolphins. So that what I'm seeing with these new generations is their connection to everything, their communication with everything. And we're not just talking about animals or fish or whatever, mammals, you know, water, you know, whether it's dolphins or whatever, but also plants as well. So what we're realizing is everything has a kind of sentience if you've got the ability to pick it up. And what we must also realize that we only see a small spectrum of light, where in that we are missing the rest of this huge spectrum where all sorts of intelligences and presences can be around us all the time that we're not even aware of. But although we may be open to feeling them, we may be open to hearing certain information or having that information given to us, and we suddenly know things and we don't know how we know them. This happens to a lot of people. How did I know that? Or they may feel that they have precognition, which is knowing things before they happen. Lots of people find that happening, and feel it's quite freaky. You know, that they said, well, I knew that was going to happen because I saw it yesterday and now it's happened today, and what have you. So these things are becoming more and more acknowledged and a lot more commonplace because people are realizing they're tapping into more of the quantum hologram, if you like, as they're saying in a hologram or whatever. And we're all creators of that. So once we realize that, it changes the way that you look at reality and what the way that you understand yourself and what else is there. So getting back to the unusual nature of the accounts, what it is showing me is the complexity of how these intelligences operate, and depending on your acceptance of your reality, your greater reality, the more likely they are to interact with you, because we're talking about not just physical, we're talking about interdimensional ones, which are just energy or frequency, extra-dimensional ones, trans-dimensional ones, and even ones visiting us from our future, as one 7-year-old told me that he came from our future and he's come back to this timeline. So we can go into a really deep rabbit hole of parallel universes, different timelines. You just keep going, and we still don't know what we don't know.
So for us that we haven't got those senses yet, so how can we train ourselves to be more aware or more tapped into the consciousness or the collective consciousness, or to the area around us, to be it other energies or extraterrestrials? How can we train ourselves? Is it meditation, or to really look into our inner self or understand ourselves better? What do you think? How can we help ourselves?
Jenny, that's a good question. And all I could say is we're all born with those abilities, whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah.
The thing is that it gets suppressed, because in many cultures we're told unless you can see it, feel it, hear it, smell it, or whatever, it's not real. When in fact that's not true. what's true is that we have an awareness. We have the abilities to sense things, to feel things, to know things, and to sense energy. But you've got to be receptive to the idea first. No one is, particularly more gifted than anyone else. Some are a little bit more open to it than others. A lot depends on our belief system. If you believe this physical thing is all there is, you're not going to experience anything because you've shut down all those senses. But we have an enormous number of multidimensional senses. So to start with, one good way is to meditate and go within and maybe ask little questions of yourself and see what comes when you do so. You may find that when you have the willingness to open up, often there's a part of you that helps you do it and guides you to practices that will help you do that. Meditation is good. Visualization is good. Some people open up when they've done a healing. They've learned about energy work and they learn a healing protocol, like Reiki, for example, may open them up. Some do shamanic practices where they learn how to open up like a shamanic way. Others may spontaneously have out-of-body experiences, for example. There are people that have opened up after a near-death experience and then started to see beings and whatever. So everyone has a different way maybe of being activated, but the willingness to tap into that is the start, because what you're saying to that greater reality is, I'm ready. I want to know more. I want to sense more. But going into energy work or going in to meditate and learning to ask questions of your inner world, that can start that process. Because I believe, because I've worked with many hundreds that do this, is we are surrounded by these presences, whether you call them your guardian angels or your grandma or, granddad or whatever it is.
Yeah, ancestors.
Many people accept that the spirits are there. Of course they are. But you've got to be ready to want to engage with that. And so start, I say, think of them, because when you think of them, you're bringing in the frequency and see what happens. Just ask a simple question. I know that, many countries like yourselves are very spiritual, and they are very keen to connect to the spirits and what have you. They're everywhere. And you can learn how to recognize their energy signature, which what I mean by that is when they're close to you, there'll be a certain energy you feel, like a buzz or a feeling, or you may get this energy surge. That means often there's some presence there. So who are you? What are you there for? And see what you get from that, because you'll find there is a kind of communication, a feeling or a knowing or a sensing. We all have it. It's just knowing how to work with it in a way that gives you confidence. But everyone can do this. This is not, this isn't unusual. It's not special. Everyone can do it. They've just got to believe it first.
But how to differentiate between that kind of feeling or knowing from imagination or hallucination? Have you encountered some that came that they may have imagined their own story or made up their own story?
Yeah.
How to differentiate that?
That's a very good question. And when I work with someone, it's the same thing when you do hypnosis with someone. Because they're saying, how do I know when it's my subconscious and I'm not making it up?
Yeah.
And I'll say it's very, very distinctly different. For example, in hypnosis, you're talking to the subconscious to reveal maybe information that's happened when you were small, or, an experience or whatever it is. And they're saying, well, how do I know what I'm getting is real? I said, because there's a very distinct difference between a reality and a fantasy that you're creating. And I'll tell you how you know the difference. If I said to you, think of your bedroom, because your bedroom's real, in your mind's eye, you know where the bed is, you know where the window is, you know where the door is, right away in your mind's eye, you've got your bedroom. If I said to you, create a bedroom or imagine one, you'd have to think, how big would the room be? Where would I put the bed? Where would the window be? What color would the curtains be? That takes a process. It isn't instantly in front of you. Whereas when you get intuitive information, it's just there. Like that instant knowing. It's instant. You don't have a chance to create it. It's already there. So when you do hypnosis, for example, and they're going back to an experience, you're not saying, create where you're standing. You're saying, where are you standing? What's in front of you? You're not saying, create something. So they have to say, well, in front of me is this, this, and this. It's not coming from an imagination where you have to think about, well, what can I say? Free, or is it a house or whatever? So imagination is quite different from intuition and knowing and sensing, because it's instant. And do you know why it's instant? Because in left brain, you think before you speak, because you're thinking, I've got to think, what can I say? I'll say this. In intuition or that connection, you speak before you think. So it comes in before you have a chance to even think it. It's suddenly in your head. That's what you're doing, is you're tapping into the multidimensional, because you're not creating it and you're not logically creating it. So you're not using your imagination, you're not using your logic. It's coming in directly. And if it comes in directly, then it's either your higher self or that intuitive side of you, or you're being given information by maybe, your grandma, or some other spirit. And it will be instant. It will just be in your head, because you haven't had a chance to think it. You haven't had a chance to imagine it. So it's instant. And that's with hypnosis. It's the same thing. It's instant. When I say, what are you standing on? I'm not telling them what to stand on. They don't know unless they look in their hypnotic state and think, oh, I'm standing on the grass. They can't create that. They either see it or they don't, because they're seeing the experience again that they've recorded in their subconscious. So that's the difference. And that's how easy it is to know. In your head, you know how you've suddenly got this feeling, oh, I better not go down there today. It doesn't feel right.
Yes.
Where do you think that comes from?
So that's exactly the same feeling.
Yes. It's your multidimensional self guiding you.
Yes.
Without any logic. You can't say,
without
well,
any logic.
Why? No, it's not logical.
Suddenly don't want to go there. It's just no reason.
That's right. But there's a part of you that knows that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And that's not something you've created. It's not something you've imagined, because that's different. You have to imagine something to imagine it. You have to create it. If you see what I mean.
Yes.
You've got to know what to imagine first and create it. So it's not that process. It can't be your imagination. It's coming in instantly before you think, well, why do I feel like that? Oh, yeah. That's when you're tapping into the multidimensional. When those things come in, because it will come in just like that. Often you might be just washing up, or you might be sweeping the floor, and suddenly something comes in. That's when you're tapping into the multidimensional.
So everyone got that. Pretty sure everyone got that.
We're born with it. What we are born with is we have the ability to work with 3D and multidimensional. What we're meant to do is have them together, so that we work together with them, so that the multidimensional explains the 3D. But if you're close to your multidimensional, 3D doesn't make any sense. That's why people get depressed. That's why people give up, because they've lost their connection to their source, to the support network that we've created as a soul. And the spirits that help us, we shut that down. And so we feel disconnected and depressed, because we can't make sense of 3D without our multidimensional explaining it and helping us to understand it.
So we should be more paying attention to all these feelings and listen to these so-called inner voices.
Yes.
That suddenly comes up, and most of the times we think it's not logical, it's not making any sense, so we just ignore them. So we need to go there. This is how I plan. This is what my plan is, and I got to do that. And even if I got a hunch that tells me otherwise, I won't follow it, because that's not making any sense. But now you're telling us we need to listen and pay attention to these little feelings, little intuition, hints that given us that even it doesn't make sense.
The synchronicities, the coincidences that you get are part of your multidimensional self creating situations to get you to take notice. And the more you take notice, the more you expand. If you ignore it, then you don't go any further. But if you listen to it and open up to it, you expand even more multidimensionally. And you have what I call a spiritual team, whether or not you call them your guardian angels, whether you call them grandma and granddad or whatever, it doesn't matter. But they're there to guide you and support you and help you. And when you listen to that, when you get that feeling that could come from one of these wonderful souls, when you follow that, you find it always works. Every time you listen to it, it always works. I'm just thinking of, Auntie Joan, and Auntie Joan phones. Where's that? Because you're tapping into the frequency of Auntie Joan.
Oh, even for emotions.
Emotions are a really good guide to something real. If you've got an emotional connection to something, that's even more tangible, because you don't get emotions unless there's something very real attached to it. You don't get emotions about something that doesn't affect you or, whatever. Emotions are a real guide to truth, because when you get an emotion about something, it's telling you there's a truth there. Listen to it, because your heart's saying this is true. This is important. So our emotions and our heart are telling us the truth when you listen to that. So all of these ways are ways of you knowing you're tapping into that other part of you that's guiding you on your 3D journey.
In New Age or in different areas, the teachings will be like, well, you have to be emotionally stable to be, to be spiritual. But for sensitive people like maybe me or Kaza or many others who are really very emotional, will suddenly go ups and downs, and the society will tell you, okay, this is emotionally unstable, this is not good for health, it's not a good mental health state, that if a spiritual person needs to be spiritually calm and very little emotions. So, well, I learned that it's not the case, because if we are sensitive, we are more tapped into the emotions, and we feel the feelings will be stronger, and that actually gives us good hints or guidance that what is yes, what is no.
You're absolutely right. We've been programmed to be robots when we're not robots. And actually our emotions are a great guide to truth. When you get that resonance or that feeling of warmth or knowing, and you feel moved by something, it's actually healthy. It's when we deny our emotions, when we cut ourselves off from them, we actually will find that we don't operate very well. And we can get very depressed, because we're suppressing the very feelings and emotions that make us human. Our emotions are a great guide to truth. When you feel drawn to things and you feel a warmth to something, it's telling you something, it's guiding you into something. So emotions are a wonderful gift. And it's only when we shut those down that we end up, and the trouble is with a lot of medications that happen, the way that when people take medications because they, are unwell or depressed or whatever, what they're really doing is making you more robotic.
Yes.
Because they're suppressing your emotion. So you're not dealing with anything then. You're shutting yourself off from everything. There's no cure there. It's just that they're stopping you from feeling. And we're here to feel, we're here to sense, we're here to know. Those are all the senses that we get as a multidimensional being, because that's what we are.
That's making sense, because it's natural human nature. That's what we are feeling. So we shouldn't be against it, and instead we should embrace it, and we look into it. What's the cause? What's the problem with the emotions? I mean, what's the reason of feeling that emotion?
Yeah, because then we are allowing ourselves to be fully alert and awake to who we are, to be connected to everything. It's and those children that talk, the empaths that are being born, that's how they operate. They operate through feelings and knowings and sensings, and they have this empathy to connect to everybody. It can be hard for them actually to do that some of the time, until they learn how to manage it.
Yes.
That's what they've actually come here to do, is to actually sense what's going on with someone. So it's a very powerful thing. And and it's what we are. It's who we are.
Thank you, Mary. It's very fruitful and informative interview with you, and definitely we've learned a lot. And I'm hoping that everyone can really listen and digest and can live on it with what we've learned today. So thank you very much, Mary, and it's a pleasure and to have you today.
Jenny, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So next time we'll invite another guest to share more with us. And so stay tuned for our next show. Thank you. Bye-bye.